to effectively develop a biosensor, you require to know exactly the biomarker to look for, right? Based on which you will design your sensor. So it's very important to know a couple of things about biomarkers. Today I'll give you one talk where we shall be discussing the exact definition of a biomarker. Biomarkers can be many. They can be biochemistry based biomarkers. I work on omics. So I generally work on omics driven biomarkers, which has taken the diagnostic division by storm. So we will talk about omics driven biomarkers, the uses, the different types of biomarkers, characteristics, biomarkers, and precision medicine. That's a new topic which is coming up a big way. And of course, the last one, point of care diagnostics using biomarkers. I'm sure Gorachand has covered. I'll show you a couple of slides and of course limitations. So let's start quickly. We just have 1 hour. Okay. So definition of biomarker. It has changed over a period of time. So initially, as you can see, it was defined to be a characteristic that is objectively measured and evaluated as an indication of any kind of disease or response to a drug or therapy, treatment, surgical intervention, or simply that of a biological metabolism. Again, that was further changed slowly with time, and it was defined as any substance, structure you talk when you're talking of a tumor, a growth or something, any substance, structure, process that can be measured in the body, or maybe directly you don't measure, but the tumor may be secreting some products. So those products which can influence or predict the incidence of the or outcome of the disease. That was further changed. And see the third definition, which makes it very tricky. It's a functional variant or quantitative index, which reflects whether you are predisposed to a disease or you have a disease or how well you're responding to a treatment. So quantitative index is very important. What does quantitative index mean? That you should be able to say the level of it. Your sensor should not only detect the presence of that compound, but it should also be able to tell you the level. That's a true biomarker. So if I say glucose level in serum for diabetes, yes, it is a biomarker for diabetes. I know the level. I know that if I am, crossing 120, I am a typical diabetic. If I am 80, then I am a normal person, non-diabetic. So the level is very important. The quantitative index, which we most of the time tend to ignore when we are making biosensors and all. We just see कि अच्छा detect कर लिया, so we are happy, right? Okay. Omics driven biomarkers. Before doing at omics driven biomarkers, I will very quickly, very briefly also tell you what is omics. Omics is, I think all of you know, this central dogma that the DNA is contained, the gene is contained in the DNA, and with each gene expressed, there is a manufacturing of a corresponding protein. Okay. So does it happen directly? No. In between, there is another step where you have mRNAs formed from the DNA. This method is called transcription. So in technically we say DNA transcribes into mRNA, and mRNA translates into proteins in such a manner that this mRNA determines what should be the, just mark those my words, I'm going slowly. The mRNA determines what should be the amino acid sequence in the proteins which will correspond to that particular genetic code in the DNA. So it's a very controlled event. Most of you must be knowing this, or people not from biology may not know that. How many of you are aware of this central dogma?
Ma'am, I am.
You are?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. So this is very simple. I'm trying to tell you, and you don't have to get into the depth of this. But it's very important to know these also because you have DNA markers, you have mRNA markers, you have protein markers. And nowadays you have metabolites also as markers. So central dogma, most of you know that DNA transcribes into mRNA and mRNA translates into proteins, right? What you probably didn't know that this protein does not sit, proteins are the workhorses of a organism. They are responsible for life, for different functions in the body. So it's a dynamic process. These proteins are getting breaking down. There is energy consumption, and what do they break down into? Metabolites, small molecular weight molecules. So during a reaction, intermediate metabolites are also formed, end product metabolites are also formed. Again, they are used up. So it's a vicious cycle. It's not that this constantly happening in our body. And when there is a disease, this simple dogma I'm showing you can be affected at any point. Your gene and all, here in the first one can undergo a mutation. The proteins may get degraded. Some of the metabolites which were, say, creatinine, it was so normal in length, it was so normally expressed in normal person, you'll find a 5-fold expression more in probably a kidney disorder. So all these get affected, and our aim is to identify the one which is affected due to the disorder and then move ahead in making your point of care sensor. So very quickly, omics is divided into genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and metabolomics. Genomics is, of course, studying the omics means whole, entire. So that means now it's very simple. When I study the complete genome of an organism, I call it genomics. When I study the complete set of mRNA is expressed at a certain point of time, becomes trans. Hello? Anybody was speaking? Can you hear me?
Sure, ma'am, we can.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I think somebody unmuted. So protein is exactly the same thing when expressed by a genome, the entire set of proteins expressed by a genome. And metabolomics is again the specific cellular processes leave behind some metabolites which are unique chemicals, fingerprints, or signatures. So this is metabolomics. From here, we have to select our biomarker. So when this is just trying to tell you that studying proteins as a marker is challenging because look at the number of proteins which can be expressed in a body, right? When you do proteomics, so many proteins are there. Relatively less genes and much lesser metabolites. There have been some metabolite markers also yet to come into clinical practice, but there is a lot of work going on. So we have, as on the basis of that central dogma, which I showed you, DNA, mRNA, proteins, and metabolites. You can have DNA marker, RNA marker, protein marker, and metabolite marker. Okay. I already told you to identify a DNA marker out of the without having a clue. Suppose I refer to literature and I see people are identifying some specific gene, BRCA1, 2 in breast cancer. So I'll say, okay, let me make a biosensor where I'm going to use this gene which is reported. That is not looking for a marker. You are taking somebody else's reported marker and making a sensor, which most of you must be doing. Generally, you have to study the entire sequencing and identify indices with respect to controls and then see which is the most robust marker. And then you can make a sensor. That is not easy. The same person cannot do that because identification of a marker, I'll be showing you later, validation later, trials in humans, it is a matter of not less than 10 years. So if you're thinking I will first identify a marker and then I will make a sensor, that is actually a dream come true. It will happen, you will get some marker to be dysregulated, but how robust it is, how reproducible it is will always remain a question. We don't need to go into these methods by which you are studying omics. This I've just written so that you can, if you are very interested, you can look it up. Now, biomarker discovery and evaluation, just as I was telling you, you cannot do it along with a biosensor development. So first you have to decide the target to be selected. Am I going for urine samples, blood, serum? You have to design the study, target selection, which disease, everything. You have to ask yourself why. When I say why, if I now start designing some sensor with a biomarker for which already a very well established test is there, so that is a futile attempt. So always designing the study, you must select a biomarker for which you don't have a parallelly existing very simple biochemical test. Because often, we'll end up designing a study and then we realize maybe for 200 rupees you have a blood test existing, maybe a well established blood test. So then things become futile. Now, biomarker confirmation. This is very important. Every time you perform any experiment, you will find X number of molecules, I won't call them markers, X number of molecules to be dysregulated, either up or down. You can't consider, okay, this is a marker because it's maximum dysregulated. Confirm and reconfirm. And then preclinical validation. Preclinical validation is, does this really work in a suboptimal, this is preclinical validation would be in a population, in a very small population, and in that you will validate, presuming in a very controlled manner, presuming that it does not harm your patient in any manner because you have not done any clinical trial as yet. Then slowly phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial. If it is some kind of a drug therapy you have developed, Then, of course, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 become more tricky because then you have to talk of safety, efficacy, and all. In here, it is not about a drug, it is a biomarker. The difference between phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 will be your number of participants, with phase 3 going up to more than 3,000, up to 3,000 participants. Phase 2 has around hundreds of participants. We hardly in India, even in our labs, everywhere, when we are looking for a biomarker, we take 30 to 50 participants, which is actually grossly wrong. Because human body, behavior of a human body, one to another, is very different. So you cannot say that if you measure one particular variable in my body, one molecule, in your body also it will have the exactly same level. So there is a lot of deviation. And one more very important thing I'll mention here before I forget. For all of us, when we are trying to make a sensor, we often don't take into account, we only target for a particular disease, right? We must keep in mind that marker should not be detected by or rather taken up by another disease. That, for example, CA125 is considered to be a marker of ovarian cancer. It's a very established biomarker and doctors recommend it also. But there's another gynecological disorder called endometriosis. There also CA125 is very, very high. So what the doctors do is, in case there's any kind of doubt, they have to rule out endometriosis and then look at the values. So CA125 you will not see is a very good marker because again it's valid for two reasons, in two diseases. So that is also very important for biomarker. And of course, after phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, what I have not given here is, then you have to take a FDA approval if you are in USA, or if you are in India, you take it from the Government of India, Drugs Controller General Office, DCGI. They will approve, then you will do a phase 4 clinical trial following approval, and then the product comes to the market and is launched. Because I have to show this slide to you because you can appreciate from here why what we make does not easily go to the market, which is a concern of our country. There's a lot of regulatory approval right at the end. So what do the scientists generally do? They just transfer the rights and everything to a industry. But it is ideal if there is one drug, just I'm telling you, this is a male contraceptive, which my boss started, I think, in 1970s. And he has not transferred it, and he has done all this. His is a contraceptive, not a biomarker. He did preclinical validation, he did phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. He got the approval of the alone. He did not transfer it to anybody. Drugs controller, that approval also came. He finished phase 4, and now product launch marketing we have reached. And whatever is left is this regulatory approval, and now then we had COVID. Okay. So, but that he started in 1970s, and now he is 75 years old himself. But he was adamant that he will not transfer it to the industry. He will do it, because industry will come out with the same product at the cost of maybe 5,000 rupees one injection. And he says this is for the common masses, for population control. So he wants to keep it a very low price. So this slide tells you the challenges, the the patience required to develop a biomarker. Any questions till now? You can discuss. This is more of a discussion class. I mean, I don't want a very formal kind of a class with you all. So look at the bottom. Can you see decrease in the number of analytes? What does this mean? Can anybody say? Yeah, you all are there?
So, ma'am, when we are particularly selecting a particular biomarker
Yeah.
amongst all the available analytes, so obviously we are bringing the number of analytes
Yeah,
that we are
very
analyzing
good.
down.
We have to
So,
bring them down. It's like
yes,
screening and rejecting, you know?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, exactly. So your aim is that even if I do omics and all, I get a huge number, but then I must screen and somehow decrease, and I must have here a lot of statistical analysis comes in. I keep a cutoff of this much, all which come fall variance less than one, I reject. You know, so you keep on giving all these bioinformatics and all you can use. We do that in our lab. So you keep on reducing, and then suddenly you'll find out of 23 molecules, only 3 are most significantly altered. So that is the idea. And while you are the number of analytes are decreasing, your number of samples have to increase. Preclinical being hardly, honestly speaking, what we do in our labs and all, where we are working on biomarkers, we do that. The number of subjects we take or samples we take is equivalent to the preclinical, and it's over. And it's over. So that is where, which is the misfortune. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 is also something you have to take permission from ICMR, and also nobody wants to get into the regulatory body approval. Takes time. So because as it is a group of patients is called a cohort. It's written at the bottom. So larger the cohort, more robust is your marker, undoubtedly. Oh, okay. So I have already spelt out phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. So the identified biomarkers, phase 1 basically, in a very small group of patients, we will try to test their value. I have told that. Phase 2 is validated for reproducibility, and what is again and again tested is phase 1. What is not written here is safety. Phase 2 is again safety, but in a larger number of patients. Phase 2 is also reproducibility. By phase 2, if you see that it's not reproducible, you will abandon the project. Once you see that yes, it is reproducible in different laboratories also, this is also a very big problem of biomarkers. I will follow one protocol, I will find one difference, I'll identify one marker. Maybe somebody else, even using my same protocol which I have published, does it in IIT Delhi from their samples patients they take from AIMS. They may not get it because there is lab to lab variation in sample processing, and the entire thing may change. I may get the metabolite citrate as a marker, they may get a lactate. Then how do you make your sensor? Based on what? So these are very big issues. So phase 2, I should have multicentric trials. Everybody will follow my protocol. Everybody will take patients with the same inclusion and exclusion criteria, which means if we are trying to establish a biomarker for patients with heart block, cardiovascular disorders, moderate, then we must ensure that person, if I am taking patients with cardiovascular disorders plus diabetes, or I'm taking cardiovascular disorders and I'm very strict, I'm saying they should not have diabetes or they should not have any asthma, anything, or other lung, any diseases, which is other diseases are called comorbidities. So I'll say I'll only take heart patients, no comorbidities, and I collect their samples to identify a biomarker. I give my same protocol to IIT Delhi. They will also follow my same protocol. They also take cardiovascular patients, but they have forgotten some are diabetics, some have COPD, lung disease, some have asthma. Do you think my biomarker will match theirs? Most likely not. Most likely not. So what we say is you must follow to identify a biomarker in phase 2 where you will have different laboratories. It's called multi-centric trials. Multi-centric trials where patient inclusion and exclusion criteria should be strictly followed all throughout. Otherwise, we'll not have reproducibility. Phase 3 is again a larger patient population. You must the specificity and sensitivity. How many of you know ROC curve? Have you been taught ROC?
No, ma'am, not really.
It is so important for biomarker. So basically, remember ROC curves are plotted when you find a biomarker. Suppose I identify 3 markers which seem to be good for a particular disease. Now I will plot ROC curves. That is, it will give me my specificity and sensitivity. From the curve, I'll get the data. It's very simple. It's all using softwares. I find out of the 3, the sensitivity of one is 98%. What does it mean? That if I say the sensitivity of a marker is 98%, what does it mean?
So if the marker is supposedly uh, it wants to sense like out of 100 molecules, it will react to 98 of them.
Yeah, so very easily detectable, right?
Yes,
But specificity is 62%. That means this marker is not specific to only the disease I'm developing it for.
trying
So
to develop it.
yeah, so it should be both relatively high. So out of all, so first I have to do my, as mentioned here, number of analytes I have to decrease. Then finally, the ones that look like probable markers, out of that I will have to establish their reproducibility in different laboratories, also in my own laboratory. Here comes a very interesting concept of validation cohort and exploratory cohort, which I do in my lab. What happens here is, suppose I am trying to establish a biomarker for a particular disease, say lung cancer. Now, I take 30 lung cancer patients sputum and I take 30 lung cancer patients, normal control. I do my omics, this, that, and I am able to identify 2 potential biomarkers which are very 5-fold, 10-fold dysregulated, maybe upregulated or downregulated with respect to controls. I also find they have good sensitivity, specificity. Now what I can do is, this is not enough. This is my study on 30 patients of lung cancer, 30 patients of controls, which means this is my discovery cohort of patients or my exploratory cohort of patients. What does that mean? This is the first group where I have established.
The number of patients where the first study is done.
Right. And then comes your validation cohort. What do you do in a validation cohort? You will take a fresh set of another 30 patients.
And check that whether the same results are.
Right, right, right. Now, what some people do, there are two schools of thought. Some people say, why should I again run all? Only these two markers which I identified in my exploratory cohort, I'll only look for those. Some groups say, no, I'll repeat everything again and see whether all molecules are showing the same kind of trend. So please remember this, that is very important to have a validation and an exploratory cohort. This phase 4 I have not written here will be done only after the regulatory body's approval. And phase 5, which is not done in India, this is abroad, they do again overall benefits and risks of the. In India, after phase 4, we go for marketing. Now we are going to discuss some of the biofluids. Now, which molecule, which groups of molecules are most popular in terms of making biomarkers? Proteins. Proteins are most abundant. I showed you there. Proteins, antibody based detection, you know, all ELISA kits are also basically detecting biomarkers, right? So basically, you all know ELISA? How many of you know ELISA?
Ma'am, I know.
Only one. All of you know, right, ELISA? What is your background, everybody?
Ma'am, most of us from the biology background and some of from chemistry.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so even chemistry must be knowing a little bit of biology. Okay. So anywhere in this biology part, if you want to ask something, please go ahead. People with not knowing biology, because no question is foolish, I feel. You can ask anything. Okay. Now we know a little bit about biomarkers. It can be a DNA marker, mRNA marker, protein marker, metabolites, how to narrow down everything. We have learned patient population. Now, what is your sample? This is something when you're going to make your sensor, we immediately talk of the sample. Very quickly, I'll tell you. Uh, the concept is that the entire body tissues. Why do we want biological fluids? Okay, they all these tissues in our body, they liberate protein components in the fluids, and this is the hypothesis. And in presence of a disease, the amount of proteins liberated will change. Either some will be downregulated or some will be overtly expressed. And we happily presume that, okay, this protein which is overtly expressed or underexpressed because of disease perturbations is a disease associated biomarker. And we presume also, so if I do a proteomic analysis, that is, if I study all sets of proteins in any body fluid of a patient, of course, when I say patient, you have to do all the entire set of proteins in that same biofluid in a set of healthy individuals for comparison purposes. So we feel we'll get a lot of new diagnostic markers. This is the hypothesis, which sounds good, but there is a lot of gap between theory and reality, because of which there hasn't been much success. Still, one of the main reasons is biochemistry tests are gold standard. Whenever you have to undergo surgery or any disease, you have to go for a lot of blood tests. Biosensors, being used are still limited. For newer markers, you can always make a fancy glucose sensor, but it's an old biomarker. You can make the sensing device to be more and more modern. You understand? I'm talking about biomarker, not biosensor. Getting newer biomarkers every day, discovery is not easy. So what is happening here? This is our hypothesis, but actually the proteins which are getting leaked out from the tissues are in very low concentration. In fact, it is masked. The ones which are because of the disease are in very low concentration, and you have some other proteins which are in very high concentration, which are not related to the disease, and they will mask. I'll come to that later. Discovery and validation I've told you. Now see this one. This is a protein which is available in great quantity in the brain. 1433 theta protein it is called. A neuronal protein. You know what a cerebrospinal fluid is, all of you? Chemistry people? So it is a fluid which is in which your spinal cord and the brain are suspended. Okay? Spinal cord and the brain. Cerebrospinal fluid. Now, it was proteomics led to the discovery of this protein as a marker for this disease, CJD. It's known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. We'll call it CJD. What is CJD? CJD is a neurodegenerative disorder where slowly a lot of complications are there. The brain degeneration starts, and then dementia and many more things happen. So this was considered to be a marker, and people were very happy with it. Then soon it was challenged for its selectivity and specificity because it was found to be dysregulated, associated with Alzheimer's. It was associated with Parkinson's, and it is associated with schizophrenia. These are all other neurological disorders. So again, this is an example to tell you specificity is so important. Okay. For brain in particular, one does not like to look for a biomarker in blood. I mean, if you are trying to make a sensor, and if somebody tells you, let's make a serum marker, that would not be very wise. Why? Can somebody say? It's written here. Basic reason is because the cerebrospinal fluid is limited to the brain and the spinal cord. And what about our blood? Blood washes all organs in our body, right?
Sure, ma'am, yes.
You agree, all of you? You understanding this?
Yes, ma'am.
Or should I repeat again? Is this clear to you, or should I repeat about the CSF?
Ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. So only one person is saying, so everybody should speak up. Why I'm
Yes, ma'am,
driving?
yes.
Yeah. So why? Yeah. So why
Yes,
I'm
ma'am, it
trying?
is.
Okay. Why I'm saying this is most of you must be making sensors using which biological fluid? Tell me, anybody? PhD students? Is anybody there making sensor or reading upon sensor? Which biofluid are you using?
Blood.
Blood. Most of you go with blood because all of us go. Why? It is so easy. So nobody asked me. I am very disappointed that, ma'am, how do you take out CSF? All of you know?
It's so invasive.
Yeah, exactly. But how do you take it?
Lumbar puncture.
Yeah, very
Yes,
good.
ma'am. I'm
Yeah,
from
so somebody should tell me that, ma'am, fine, CSF has advantages because it is collecting protein only from the spinal cord and the central nervous system. But isn't it invasive? That is the answer. So always we want the sample, the biofluid to be in which we are going to look for a biomarker. We want that biofluid to be in proximity to the organ of interest. Okay, but it is not always possible. It is not always possible. Now, suppose somebody has a fatty liver. Will you open up his stomach and go in and take out the fat from the liver and look for a marker there? You can't. Then you will look for a biofluid which is going to be in close proximity to the liver. If you don't find anything, then you don't have an option. You will take from the blood. Blood is the only one which is freely available. It washes all organs. So it is washing liver also. So we are presuming that if the liver has some problem, it will wash it and bring the abnormal proteins or markers. But what is the demerit of blood? Can somebody try out and say? What is the limitation of taking plasma or serum as a biofluid for establishing biomarker?
When we will design like biosensor, then there will be more chance of less specificity.
Yeah, because what does the blood do?
Because it contains all
Very
kind of
good, very good,
bio.
very good, very good. I want all of you to answer like this. You all know it. Just imagine, I'm not trying to teach you something hi-fi. I'm just trying to very basic idea of biomarkers and biological fluid. And so I just want all of you to know that while designing biosensors and point of care devices are very exciting, the first part is very challenging, establishing a good biomarker. So anyway, very well said. So there are, all everything has its own advantage and disadvantage. While for the brain diseases, it is very, very wise to take something like cerebrospinal fluid, which is a fluid housing the spinal cord and the brain only. And then I can say, oh, so whatever secretions are coming here has nothing to do with the liver and the kidney and all. No secretions of that are reaching here. So I should be getting more specific. Whatever changes I find will be more specific to the brain. While I say that, the other demerit is every time I need a sample, I have to go through, the patient has to go through lumbar puncture. That is an invasive way of taking out from your spinal cord. But then at times, when they do biopsy and all, it has to be a little invasive also. But when you are going to, yeah, say, okay, I thought somebody wants to say something. So situation is much bleaker. We have done this already. Extensive efforts to find cancer-associated biomarkers, limited results. Most studies involving comparison of plasma. You all know difference between plasma and serum?
Yes, ma'am.
Both of them come from
Sure, ma'am. Yes.
blood only, okay? Lot of people identify in plasma, lot of people identify in serum. So a lot of biomarkers discovery has identified a number of proteins. For you'll find maximum studies done on cancer, and you will find that most of these proteins identified to be dysregulated. When I say dysregulated or differently expressed, I mean to say it may be significantly overexpressed or significantly less expressed. The most of them found in cancer have been proteins which are related to inflammation, like haptoglobins. So then is it a marker? Not at all. Even in inflammation, anything, rheumatoid arthritis also has inflammation. You will find haptoglobin is upregulated. Any inflammatory disorder. So then my biomarker is lacking specificity. So it is written in the last line, the biggest challenge of biomarkers is they are usually not disease specific. After a lot of experiments, everything, spending money, you will always find something dysregulated. But it will not, most of the time, I'll not say it will be, most of the time, it is not specific to the disease. You'll either find angiogenic markers, inflammatory markers. Angiogenic is related to a lot of blood vessels have formed, so markers of that you'll find because of inflammation. So those are not specific to the disease. Okay, this is what we have discussed. Fluids collecting proteins from one particular organ or anatomic structure, such as cerebrospinal fluid. Articular fluid means fluid around your joints, like the knee joints. Or pleural fluid. Pleural means in the lung. So these fluids are very good. Tell me, if I want to study a disorder of the lung, should I take fluid from the lung to look for a marker, or would a plasma blood marker would be, serum marker would be more specific? Tell me. Very simple. Tell me.
I guess it will be pleural fluid, like lung fluid. With
Pleural.
lungs.
Yeah, but it is so invasive. Imagine when you do
Yes.
it. Yeah. So while this is the same example which we did for CSF, the increasing probability of finding biomarkers. But the problem is these have to be collected in a somewhat invasive manner, and limited availability disqualifies them as a source for early marker in a wide population. So basically these are not feasible. One biofluid, which has been really, even now they're doing a lot of research, even I'm trying to do this, working on this, because it is available in a large amount, totally non-invasive, easy to collect. So it also has its own challenges, that is urine. Okay. Now, what are the challenges of urine? Protein concentration can vary from milligrams per liter to grams per liter. There are some kinds of diseases in which protein content is very high in the urine. It is called only proteinuria. Those patients will have very high. So this is very broad range. Then there are some basically urine is what? It is excretion, right? It is going to contain lot of salts, urea. These are all going to mask your marker protein, marker metabolite. Agreed? You have to
Sure,
deplete
ma'am.
all. So basically, urine has to be depleted with liquid chromatography and all that. You have to remove all this. In addition to proteins from urinary tract, including bladder, there are some proteins which don't only restrict themselves from the urinary tract to bladder, but there is some coming also from the plasma through the kidney. So you cannot say that the urine component reflects the status of only the urinary tract and the urinary bladder, because urine proteins may be also having some proteins coming from the blood plasma through kidney. So you do have a number of components. Nonetheless, people are able to are trying to work on this, because especially in diseases where you think urine and all protein changes. This is a sample I don't need to explain to any of you. I think it's 4 o'clock. Can I take this last slide?
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we have another class then?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Sure,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sure, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. Sure.
Okay, when should we have it? Tell me.
Next week.
Ma'am, if this weekend is fine for you,
This weekend is fine for me. Yeah.
so maybe Saturday, if we can
Okay.
have.
Okay.
But the problem with like this batch is that since there are students from several other batches, so like somehow we can't get to a time slot where everybody is free. Some always has some
Okay.
guests or
So why don't we
Ma'am,
do it at the
can you
regular?
continue today 1
No,
hour?
why don't we do regular to next week, 3rd?
Yes, ma'am.
third. I guess we have a presentation, right? Like some of us do have a presentation with Gorachan sir.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, ma'am, that would have been actually the best option. Just,
So
schedule time.
Saturday, Sunday around 7 p.m. and all is also late for you all?
Ma'am, like till the
Ma'am, I
triple
think
M.
Sunday there will be
Everyone
there
is
will be
free.
time.
Sunday hoga, anytime you all say.
Yes, yes, ma'am. We are free the
Ma'am,
entire day.
can you take today 1 hour class, like from 4 to 5? Because today's class is 2 hours. So I think
Today's
you
is
can
2
take 1 hour
hours.
more today. Yes, ma'am. So you can
Oh,
take class up to 5 and
Gorachal
you can
told me 3
complete
to
your.
4.
No, no, no. Sir told actually you may have problem taking 2 hours continuous stretch of class. But
I
today's
was
class
see,
is up to 5.
I was due for a surgery. That didn't happen, so I'm
Oh,
fine now. So
okay, okay, okay. That's why sir told. No, ma'am. It's fine if you continue the class today up to 5.
okay. But one more thing is there, you all should be able to not get saturated. I always do that with my classes. I always ask my students that is it enough or I can carry on talking, because it should enter your head also. Isn't that important? So are all of you okay with it? I can again carry on.
Sure, ma'am. I guess, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it is fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
it is fine.
Great. Great. Fine. So we did about CSF, we did about urine, and I have come to now plasma or serum, that is blood. Most of you are working on that, as you said, because see the first line, considered to be the most agreeable biofluid.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Do you also present right now?
Tell me.
Ma'am,
You
we
have to
can't
We
see
share
your
actually
your
cannot
slide
see
screen.
the
actually.
slides. Yeah.
What
Can you please reshare your screen?
Can you see?
Sure, ma'am, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You can.
Okay, so plasma and serum are the most agreeable biofluid. They are easily collected. Their composition is well known.
Ma'am, the
Excuse me,
PPT
ma'am.
is not visible.
Sorry to
Can't see the
interrupt you once
PPT
again.
now.
Presentation
Yeah,
is
actually,
not
we can see
visible.
your screen, but not the PPT.
क्या हो गया? I was.
I think sharing entire screen will work.
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see the slides.
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see.
Okay, thank you. Again, I repeat. So plasma serum is the most agreeable biofluid. And as you know that this is the collection, the composition, they're all well established, well documented. Then, as you said, that it collects protein from each and every tissue. So we call it often the universal source of biomarkers, which has its own advantages and own disadvantages. The other biofluids, which are not so well known, are saliva. Now, saliva and all are very good biofluids when you're going to work on identification of biomarkers for oral cancer, thyroid cancer, you know, these head and neck cancer, sweat. People have been trying to pick up sweat a lot as a sample, very difficult because again, sweat contains a lot of salts. We don't want a salts too. Salts and all, are compounds which will inhibit detection of your biomarker. Bronchoalveolar lavage fluid, this I collect for my research work from Kolkata Fortis Hospital. Bronchoalveolar lavage is, there is this, see the figure, you can see this black pipe kind of a thing going in, it's called a bronchoscope. This bronchoscope goes inside the lung. There's an amount of pre-measured saline which is put in, and from deep inside the lung, the airways, it will collect the cells. We get a lot of neutrophils, macrophages, everything. Now, I agree this is quite invasive, but again, this only gives you the lower respiratory system picture. And often, if you want to identify some, at times it becomes important to take invasive samples. Suppose I want to identify a biomarker for lung cancer. Do you think a serum marker will work? Most likely not, or an urine marker, or a urine marker, serum marker, or these may not work. But definitely this fluid is usually taken for biopsy. It is taken for other tests also. There are other lung disorders I'll not get into. So when they take this bronchoalveolar lavage fluid in the hospital, they give me around 4 to 5 ml for my studies to identify biomarkers. It's very interesting, but for eye problems like glaucoma and all, people want to have some kind of early diagnostic markers where you are able to say that glaucoma is a kind of blindness which develops over time. So if I can identify some set of proteins in these tears and I find some set of proteins and then in people with glaucoma, so I can say sir, I'm taking a class, I'll call you back. I just now told you about my supervisor who has made a biomarker over 25 years and he just called up. Huh. So, where was I? Tears. Okay. So, tears, suppose consider the patient with glaucoma, that is blindness. I take the tears of that person and I use my technology and I find some biomarker X in all glaucoma patients to be highly upregulated as compared to controls, that is healthy people. Now it would be very nice if I can use this as some kind of a early diagnostic marker. So with all these studies in mind, tears have been explored as a non-invasive biofluid. Another one is induced sputum. That is again for head, neck, thyroid. I told you. What is sputum? You know, all of you know sputum.
Yes, ma'am.
Induced sputum is when sputum doesn't come out spontaneously. Then you are made to flush with, I think, some gargle kind with some sodium chloride solution, and the sputum is collected. I've never worked on it, but a lot of work because this is also relatively non-invasive. The last one I work on this also. This is also one of my biofluids. So I work in my lab on serum plasma. I work on BALF. I work on exhaled breath condensate and often lung tissues. If the patients have to undergo a lung biopsy and they take out lung tissue, then they give me a little for my biomarker discovery. Of course, I can't take a lung tissue from a patient just for my experiments. That's ethically not permitted. So on the right is a figure, where basically exhaled breath condensate is the patient breathes out and at the mouth we have this trap kind of a thing where he will breathe into it, his breath. And there is a condenser attached so that immediately the breath is cooled and it becomes a liquid. Then you can do your studies there. That's that's why the word exhaled breath condensate is a condenser. So these are all different biofluids. You can look up more also. I'll come back to blood because that's what we study so much. Serum is the richest and the most complete informative proteome from a medical point of view. As all of you agreed, since almost all cells of the body in the tissues communicate with blood. And many of them release part of their contents into the bloodstream upon damage due to diseases or cell death. It is not death of the patient. Upon cell damage or cell death due to a disease. This is, although simple in principle, ability to analyze the serum proteome is very difficult. Why? Serum contains 60 to 80 mg of protein per ml. Okay. in addition to salts, lipids, electrolytes, metabolites, peptides, amino acids, everything. Out of this 60 to 80 mg protein, there are 20 proteins which are known as high abundance proteins. Like chemistry students must be familiar with these terms, aren't you? Biochemistry, you all must have studied this. Albumin, immunoglobulin, transferrin, haptoglobin. Now, these are high abundant proteins. When I say high abundance proteins, out of the total proteins present in the blood, 95 to 99% of the protein consists of these 20 high abundance proteins, masking the detection and identification of the low abundant markers. Then again, wide dynamic range. What is wide dynamic range? From milligram to gram per liter variation of each protein. One protein may be present in milligram per liter, one may be in gram per liter. So see the last point, please, all of you, and try to absorb it. Only 1% of the entire protein content of serum, because 95 to 99% are 20 high abundant proteins. Only 1% of the entire protein content of serum consists of proteins that are low abundant. And most of these low abundant are the biomarkers. So imagine it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Okay, quite a challenge, quite a challenge. Okay, with that introduction of biomarkers and biofluids, I don't think I have to explain this. You can screen for disease, characterize disease, rule out, diagnose, stage, monitor, inform prognosis, therapeutic, predict, adverse. This you can read. There is nothing to explain here. Biomarkers are very, very useful nowadays at various stages of drug discovery and development. For example, measurement of COX-2 activity to identify potential antenna. COX-2 is involved with when levels of COX-2 rise in body, there is a lot of pain. Okay. So I have a baseline measurement of COX-2 in the blood. COX-2 is here my marker, biomarker. Then I am going to use some drugs which are COX-2 inhibitors. I give a certain level. I measure, but all drug companies do this. So it is not always a biomarker. You have to drive this point out of your mind that a biomarker means something which I have to stick to my sensor. And then only it is a biomarker. No. Biomarkers are measured at various stages of drug development. If you ever go to PubMed, you'll find a huge number of papers on this. Measurement of COX-2, I will do it at different concentration. At one, I'll find that it's really lowered. So I will decide that, okay, the anti-inflammatory agent works the best at this dosage. So for this study, my COX-2 inhibition is checked because COX-2 is my marker. Then as endpoints, another example, serum cholesterol. It is a very old known marker. Simple definition, which I'll tell you. Suppose somebody has blood pressure, goes to the doctor measures the blood pressure, fine. That is the baseline level without any medicine. Then the doctor prescribes some medicine for 7 days and says, again, I'll measure your blood pressure after 10 days. So again, he measures the blood pressure. It has come down a little from 150 to 130. Still, he feels that it's not enough. He again increases the dose. Patient again goes back after 15 days. This time the pressure is normal. What is the biomarker here? Tell me. बोलो बोलो, बहुत सिंपल है, ये सब कहानी है, कॉमन सेंस. सब सो गए.
I'm here. The biomarker should be the amount of blood, right?
Anybody else? Hey, anybody else? A patient goes and complains high blood pressure, that is measured. Again, he is given a drug after 15 days. Drug X is given after 15 days. Again, blood pressure is measured. It has come down, but not so much. He is given again more drug X plus Y. Again, after 15 days. Normal. What is the?
So is it the serum cholesterol? The cholesterol, the blood cholesterol level.
We are not measuring cholesterol. इतना इजी है कि समझ नहीं आ रहा.
Pressure of the blood.
It is the blood pressure itself.
Yes. Pressure of the
Huh?
Okay, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. I didn't realize.
When you think
I was
very
maybe
complicated.
overthinking in this case. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
we are
ma'am.
overthinking.
We are thinking something more difficult word.
No. That's what I said. है ना? The other one is a little slightly more complicated. For example, for that doctor, the biomarker is blood pressure. He will give drug and he will keep on seeing whether the blood pressure is coming down or not. So to monitor that disease of hypertension, blood pressure is the marker for him. Similarly, for my diabetes, if I go, my blood glucose is the marker. He will keep on giving drugs, he will keep on increasing, and he will keep on seeing my glucose coming down. Now, when a patient goes with heart problem, cholesterol is usually high. If the doctor monitors cholesterol with the medicine, cholesterol is the marker. But if he does not monitor cholesterol, if he keeps on every time the doctor goes, he does an ECG. ECG also can be a marker. You remember I had explained on the first slide, it can be a procedure, it can be a process. So again, you have to get it out of your mind. Biomarker मतलब molecule होगा. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
It can be
Okay, ma'am.
anything, it can be anything which will help you at various stages of therapeutic treatment. Okay, now we come to different types of biomarkers. We have diagnostic biomarkers, monitoring biomarkers, pharmacodynamic. अब थोड़ा जल्दी चलता है. It's 4:25. Then I must finish. How many slides? Not numbered. Okay. Diagnostic biomarkers, I don't have to tell you. All of you know? तुम लोग बोलो, जल्दी होगा. What is diagnostic biomarker?
And something which like confirms, yes.
Yeah,
like,
the presence of a disease,
yeah.
right?
Confirm the
Diagnosis.
disease.
Diagnosis, simple. Okay. Monitoring biomarkers.
which measures the severity
So,
of the
like
disease.
you've just
Yeah.
just given the example about the blood glucose in case of diabetes.
So you're monitoring serially. See, the serially word is highlight. Yeah, serially monitor कर रहे हैं progression. Pharmacodynamic response biomarkers. A response you are going to check. That means you are giving something. Then only there'll be response. So either you are giving a medical treatment or environmental agent, some toxin is there. What is the effect of this environmental toxin? Then it is an environmental response biomarker. Safety biomarker. Safety biomarkers are always some new next generation biomarkers. And there are always new ones. For example, one typical example, though the name is safety, because these are next generation biomarkers, you will assess them with caution. For example, I'll tell you, generally kidney disorders, you measure urea and creatinine. But the problem with measuring these biochemical parameters is they rise only when there is an acute onset of the disease. So now there is a lot of activity regarding identification of biomarkers where we can predict a little early कि भाई kidney damage होगा, it's going towards damage. That would be useful, right? So safety biomarkers always identify new generation. For example, they have found out a panel of biomarkers in urine, clusterin, osteopoietin, I'm forgetting the names, 7 names are there. Now, they are giving a new drug, Myloxin or something. They have done it in rat. Thoda thoda dekar, they see how these biomarkers are getting suppressed. So these are new generation biomarkers whose safety levels are assessed in an experimental animal model with an idea to get an FDA approval. In fact, the kidney markers have got a recent approval where the appropriate risks and toxicity are studied and then they are used in humans. This is safety biomarker. Always remember this. These are for the next generation biomarkers. Susceptibility or risk biomarkers. The risk of developing, as the name, you're more susceptible. A lot of genetic markers are there. Nowadays, they can identify breast cancer, cervical cancer chances in a woman. You just have to go for some established genes, BRCA1, 3, and all. If you get them, I don't know how people do it, but you are supposed to get yourself tested. If the gene is present, that means you are at risk of developing breast cancer, prostate cancer, has PSA gene. So already a lot of genes have been identified for cancer. The problem with cancer is once it happens, it becomes dangerous. But probably one could after reading all this, and there are so many very good risk biomarkers established for a particular disease, if one would go and get them tested, I don't know. I personally feel though whatever few days you have to live in peace, that would also become agony. But that's what risk biomarker is all about. Now, prognostic biomarker and predictive biomarker. I am quite sure all of you have a very wrong definition of predictive biomarker because earlier even I used to think so until I started reading up. What do you think is a predictive biomarker? Predictive biomarker we all generally think is something which will predict early the chances to develop a disease, right?
Yes.
No. That comes to susceptibility biomarker, risk biomarker. Predictive biomarker is used to identify individuals who are more likely to respond to a particular medicine than others. So remember, predictive biomarkers mein we are always having a therapeutic intervention and how well the other person will, how well the patient will respond. Survival will be better, mortality kaisa hoga. So predictive biomarker is based on a therapeutic intervention. So please get this concept clear. Is this clear to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and there's something called prognostic biomarker. Prognostic क्या होता है? To remember it, ऐसे याद रखो. PROG is prognostic and PROG is progression. So as it will tell you how a disease may develop in an individual, course of the disease, the progression of the disease. मतलब suppose preclinical cancerous stage may you diagnose. Then you will keep on measuring some marker and you'll be able to say, oh, the patient has gone into stage 2, patient has gone into stage 3, there has been metastasis and spreading of the cancer, all by measuring the marker at different intervals for the disease. Already cancer has developed, but how it is progressing. You may give an intervention and cancer calm ho gaya. Okay? Prognostic.
Um,
Huh.
Now I had a question about the predictive biomarkers. Actually, like on what factors we are actually trying to decide that how the patient will respond to a particular medication, or and like in lieu of this, like is identification of predictive biomarkers somewhat associated with the tailor-made drugs in that respect?
Tailor-made, I'll come to that. So I have predictive assist. Let us do these 2 slides. Maybe it will become clearer to you.
Okay, ma'am.
Because that's why out of all these, I have taken up 2 extra slides on prognostic and predictive because often some marker can be both predictive and prognostic. See the Venn diagram at the bottom. There can be, yeah, and there can be diagnostic also. Common sense tells us yes. And the entire background are the different risk factors. The clinical course of a tumor is predicted by prognostic markers. So suppose a person has a tumor. So at intermittent period of time, you will be measuring some markers. You can take up any disease and any particular marker for that. There are a lot of markers. We have lot listed here. I didn't show. There are so many. Look at all these markers, KRAS mutation, HER2 marker. So a lot of markers are there. We'll not go into the names. What I'm more interested in getting the concept to you. The tumor is growing. The doctor wants to know how bad is it. Externally, you can't just say, looking at it, oh, this is very bad. Has it gone to stage 4 cancer, stage 3, stage 2 metastasis? We'll measure some markers from the tumor tissue biopsy. Based on that marker, you will decide the clinical course of the tumor. Now, for the same tumor, you'll give a medication. You will give a medication and the patient will respond to the medication. 5 patients will respond, 5 will not respond. The 5 who are not going to respond, they are the non-responders. The 5 who are going to, cancer is very interesting, you know. That's why now they are going to do a treatment. All treatments are basically they are doing abroad it has started for the same treatment of cancer. X patient may respond beautifully, but Y may not die. So they are saying it's all about individualized medicine because of the gene makeup, which is different. So who will respond and who will not respond remains a question. That's why something called precision medicine has come in. Is there any MMST in this course?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, how many of you are there?
I guess 4, ma'am.
Oh, then you all should explain all CSF and urine and all that. Huh? Okay, fine. So you all have heard of precision medicine? No. Okay. So we'll come to that. So response to a specific treatment of the tumor is assessed by measuring those markers after giving the treatment. So you understand from the first sentence difference of prognosis and predictive? Somebody asked a question, right? Okay, let's move on further. Markers under various categories such as markers of angiogenesis, metastasis, tumor suppressor genes, oncogenes are all prognostic. Okay. Now, for example, you also have example like say this is a tumor suppressor gene. I didn't take too many examples, it becomes very heavy. P53 tumor suppressor gene. What does it do? It causes apoptosis. What is apoptosis? In cancer, apoptosis is very common.
Cell death.
Yeah, cell death. Okay. Now it has been seen that if this tumor gene can be inactivated, then apoptosis is also suppressed. Whereas BCL2, this is another protein. When it is upregulated, favorable prognosis. What does favorable prognosis mean?
In the formation of the tumor.
Favorable prognosis means
not actually the formation, like
not formation.
The tumor is growing.
So better outcome.
Yes.
Better patient outcome. Chemistry people, you all are understanding? You want me to repeat? Only 4 people answering won't do. Other take one more class, but you should be understanding. It's very simple actually. You will measure markers, forget about names if it is complicated. You will measure markers. Suppose a patient has a tumor. The patient keeps on, you give some medicines to the patient. So the patient will keep on coming back to you with the medicine, right? How do you assess whether the tumor has increased or spread further? It is in what stage? Just a visual inspection doesn't help, especially a cancerous tumor is inside the body. Then what will you do? You have to measure some markers, established markers. That marker will tell you whether the tumor has reduced, whether it has spread. So then you call that a predictive marker, simply put. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All of you
Yes,
understand.
yes.
Predictive markers help to assess the most likely, it's written in very simple English, to assess the most likely response to a particular treatment type. or a chances of an individual to develop a disease. Suppose somebody comes with a preclinical stage, whether he will get a cancerous confirmed cancer, while prognostic biomarker, in fact, why should you talk only about cancer? Predictive biomarker, predictive biomarker can be also for diabetes. You will keep on measuring the blood glucose. Following your treatment. So predictive is always with treatment. Prognosis shows progression of the disease with treatment. Example of predictive biomarkers. These are the drugs given. CML is a kind of leukemia. Leukemia in the bone marrow. Cells dry up. These are the. So this drug is given, and during the course of time, all these biomarkers constantly the clinician will measure, and you will be able to say how you are responding. Example of prognostic biomarker, simple prostate specific antigen. Prostate cancer patient will come, you will measure this serially, and you will be able to say survival time, progression, how he is going to progress to predict survival, mortality. So predictive and this totally over. Yeah. Okay, an ideal biomarker. Here I'll not take time. There's nothing to explain here. It should correlate with your outcome. Expression is significantly altered in the related disease condition. This is very important. A biomarker should not have a value of 100.2 and a normal will have a value of 98.6. There should be a number of fold difference. You know, when should be significantly altered in the disease condition. 4-fold, 3-fold changes. Readily quantifiable. I told you the definition of biomarker, the third definition, remember? High sensitivity, specificity, accuracy, economical, quick, consistent. Now we come to precision medicine. This is something I was just asking the MMST people. So since it has been seen that a group of patients respond to excellently to a particular kind of a chemotherapy, let us say, and they get well and they go home, and a bunch of patients with the same type of cancer given the same treatment die, or there is a very poor prognosis. So it was decided that we must have something called precision medicine, or earlier it was called personalized medicine. Okay, so each one to be treated as an individual patient. You do not give, like if you have a, generally everybody is given the same antibiotic if you have a respiratory disorder. They are trying to change that for cancer. So let me just read it. Precision medicine as a concept concerns the adjustment of treatments to individual or subgroups of patients based on the use of disease-specific biomarkers. Can an MMST, we don't have time, but breast cancer has different classes. You know that, right? ER positive. Yeah. So different kinds of cancers, they subgroup and they treat them accordingly. Precision medicine is defined as the incorporation of disease biomarkers, molecular signatures, and phenotypes in combination with patient lifestyle and environment. Imperial College London, they are following this with the hospital. They are doing this for cancer. They're getting very good results. So patients are classified into cohorts according to differences in disease susceptibility, disease prognosis, and likely treatment response rates, that is based on predictive markers. Now, see the two figures without personalized medicine or precision medicine, and the second one is with personalized medicine. Here, let us say cancer patients are there on the left column, all given one therapy. Some there is good effect, the green one. Some there is no effect, they remain as it is, as bad. Some there is an adverse effect. With personalized medicine, cancer patients all same. The samples are taken, the biofluids we were talking about, blood, urine, tissue, DNA, valve, many more. And then you do your all this gene sequencing, or you can do metabolomics, proteomics, identify markers, and then you decide that okay, this group, along with, of course, you will have to take patient lifestyle, everything, and you have to take the green ones get the green, these ones get this, and the blue ones get, these ones get a combination, this one gets the blue one. So this is the concept now. Individualized treatment. This has been done largely for cancer. See the last line in red. An era of personalized cancer medicine in which biomarkers can be used to tailor treatment to each specific patient is a major goal in oncology. You will need biomarkers. If there is biomarker A present in these green 3 people, then they will get the green tablet. If green type of chemotherapy, then if the biomarker blue is present, then the last one blue fellow will get. If all 3 are present, then the central one will get. Okay. So next comes some examples, which I will not get into explaining also. And I also want to tell you all that you don't need to learn this. Just an example, you find many more, many more. These are again predictive markers. This is just for you to so what we do actually in here is with your samples on the left, it is written assess biomarker. So you identify your biomarker, then you assess biomarker in a group of patients. You identify in a group of validation cohort. Those are all biomarker positive, biomarker negative. The ones which are biomarker negative, you remove them. Biomarker positive patients are randomized. What is randomized? The patients in which I found my biomarker to be present, say the molecule is X. The ones who did not have, I have off study, they have removed. Suppose 100 patients have, in assessed biomarker group, suppose I had 150 patients. I assessed my biomarker, 100 are positive, 50 are negative. I remove the 50. The 100 patients with biomarker X positive, I randomize. What does it mean? Anybody?
I'm like, out of those 100, when we are pursuing further for treatment A and B, we are not doing any kind of bias.
Correct. Correct. So what we do is randomly we will make a number table or something. For 100, I will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll make 100 number, no name, nothing. And randomly we'll put treatment A, B, 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 A, B, A, B, random. This also has its own set of rules. We'll not get into randomization. So then what will you do? Then again you will measure your biomarker. Okay. This is also called enrichment designing of the study. Speak so much my throat. Okay. The next one. These are slides you all know. Gorachand has taught you all. I don't have to explain this point of care testing. You know what it is. All of you know this?
Sure, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So basically, what are POCTs? I don't have to explain. You all know this also very well. Biosensors.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you,
Yes.
yes, you have
Yes,
the
ma'am. Yes.
antibody, enzyme, everything. Even if you want to, you can just have a look. POC diagnostics for cancer detection using microfluidics. You know this also?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
This is, yeah, so this is exactly like competitive binding in ELISA. So you will have your capture antibody, you'll have a detection antibody. If you read this, you'll be able to make out. Basically, I'm not keen to explain the technology. You all must have done it by now. The first box is important, A. Sample containing biomarker is applied. That is very important. Sample containing biomarker is applied. And the second one is very important. Your biomarker should do what? Tell me.
That should be recognized by the conjugated
Yes.
antibodies,
Yes.
the antibodies which will be
Yes.
again conjugated to the nanoparticles.
Right. So this is a very important part. Cannot go wrong here. Then comes your typical established methods. If you really want to crack your sensitive designing, start thinking in a very innovative manner for a biomarker. And I think MMST people can really contribute here. Okay, even this I won't explain. I think you all know this. Again, basically same. I wanted to show you how this you all read up. It's very simple. This is something which is very nice. So, for those of you who do not know, there is an infection in the in the stomach called H. pylori. Okay, which what happens?
And that causes peptic ulcers, right?
Yeah, that causes peptic ulcer, and a long period of time untreated can cause gastric cancer also, right?
Stomach cancer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, this in the stomach, this in the stomach, if present, causes breakdown of urea into NH3 and CO2. Now, what do we need? We want to develop a device where we want to identify NH3 and CO2. So what is our biomarker here?
NH3 and CO2.
Yes.
Excellent. And it's very robust because we are not diagnosing only one. Only one, if you do, there can be many other diseases.
Yes.
Yeah. So always it is considered that if possible, we can identify two markers, it will be more robust. Now, this saliva sample is collected. And here comes your microfluidic device. This I will not need to explain so much. Only what they have done is they have ensured that they put microbeads which will recognize where there'll be dyes which have the property independent of each other to recognize two markers. One will be NH3, one will be CO2. Just read this now. Last one. Sensor is composed of two ion exchange, forget all this, pH sensitive organic dye. The pH changes, right, with CO2 measurement. Ion paired, forget the names. And the other one is another porphyrin dye capable of responding to changes in acidity. So can you see the trick they have done is independently they have taken two materials in the sensor, one which will respond to NH3. NH3 detection, they are doing it on the basis of acid-base reaction. The one CO2 detection, they are doing on the basis of a pH sensitive dye. Now, then of course, microbeads are deposited, light is done, you know the rest of it. You know this is already in the market abroad with a portable spectrophotometer. So one thing I want to tell you today with this example, you really need a very close active collaboration amongst yourselves to develop a sensor. You can appreciate that a clinician will be able to identify best the markers to be studied for a particular disease. If you want to come up with something new, and if you want to do what we usually do, copy what they're doing in the West by just making another new sensor, probably the sensing device is a little modified, then there is no fun. Otherwise, the doctors, the MMSTians, stand a great chance in deciding what could be the markers which we should look for in a disease which is still very much challenged and cannot be diagnosed easily or are very expensive to diagnose. And for example, things like vitamin D and all, they're so expensive tests, something which can be very useful. And you have chemistry coming in when it comes to deciding what kind of dyes are to be used, because I don't expect MMST to say, okay, for NH3 and CO2 detection, they can say these should be the markers to be detected. Chemistry should be able to say what kind of dyes are to be used, which will independently detect. And then, of course, you have your circuitry. So, developing a biosensor, I will end with this, that developing a biosensor requires inputs from chemists as well as clinicians. If you don't have the biomarker identified, just making a very fancy device is useless. Or if you have very good markers identified, if you don't set up the device, then also it is half done. This is nothing but just pictorially all the different ways people are doing it. Nowadays, there's a lot of mobile apps and all. But this is very easily done, and I would suggest you all look into it if you ever want to get into a project on this. Okay, so we finished. No more extra classes, huh? Okay, fine.
Yes, ma'am.
So did you understand
ma'am.
everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
If
Sure.
you didn't
ma'am.
understand, you all were very polite. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.